Thank you all for joining us. I know it's an arduous journey to get here, and I just mean it by walking across the hotel, right? Not the FinOps journey that you've all been on. But ironically, this session is about our FinOps journey. So we're going to talk you through a little bit of who is CloudHealth, for those of you that maybe don't know us or maybe don't know everything that you thought you knew. We'll talk about some of the forces that influence product decisions and some of the forces that influence in our lives, where we are today, and a little bit about our new release that we just launched, and then we'll get into details. So we'll talk about some of the nitty-gritty of things that we did in the engineering side of things. My name's Cathal Cleary. I'm the product leader for CloudHealth.
And I'm Rob Curtis. I'm an engineering manager at Cloud.
All right. Let's get stuck into it with a fun little quote. Scarcity, by its very nature, compels companies to pursue efficiency and foster innovation in the allocation and utilization of limited capital. That kind of sums up FinOps, right? That's why FinOps exists. Something is scarce, we got to do something about it. And that really drives the innovation engine. That really drives people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. If you've ever heard of the saying that necessity is the mother of invention, it's basically the same thing. This one was a much more famous person who said this. It was actually Gemini. A little bit of AI. But I thought it was a good quote to start with. Think about scarcity by its nature. Think about the opposite of scarcity, which is abundance, and how those play into your FinOps journey and how they help you to understand what you should be doing in your product lifecycle. Another little fun one. I'm going to introduce a new KPI. Now, we're FinOps, right? We love KPIs. We love being able to measure things and see the impact of things. This is another fun one. And again, AI was used here. So AI drew the meter for me. It's a little bit wonky, as AI normally is. And I gave it a few more prompts and it didn't quite do what I wanted. So a little bit of manual adjustment, but I think the point still holds true. You've got your FinOps to product influence score, right? So how much is the product influenced by FinOps? And that varies over time, right? It can be a huge amount of influence. It can be no influence whatsoever. And I think we've all experienced that on our journeys. It's like, sometimes I get listened to, sometimes I don't. I'm not quite sure why. Well, the why is back to that scarcity question, right? How scarce is cash? And if cash is scarce, whether it's real or invented, if you have a tight budget, maybe the company has cash, but you don't, that has a huge influence on what you do in terms of allowing FinOps to influence your product. The second big influencer on this KPI is your company culture. And this is something that we've experienced at least 3 times now in the past. Our company, CloudHealth, has gone through acquisition. We've changed culture a couple of times. This has, for me, looking back and reflecting on that, this is a huge influencer in how we develop our product and how much we have to pay attention to what it's costing in order to deliver that value. Now, I brought in a couple of little logos, little icons here. If I can find the clicker. Let me go through this one. The little green guy on the left-hand side means I'm more towards the better side of the FinOps influence score, probably up here somewhere. The little lightning bolt says I'm beginning to sort of move more towards the try more, fail more side of things. And the red flash is like, ooh, I've completely overcorrected here. Something's going to go wrong pretty soon. So this is something I just want to use to help you understand where we were in our journey and what happened along the way. One final little stage setting slide, startup. CloudHealth was a startup. CloudHealth was a startup in 2012. And like all startups, it went through its own funding rounds, right? The very start of that was self-funded. Somebody's putting up their own cash. Then you get into your series, maybe seed funding, maybe angel funding, then series A, B, C. And each way along that journey, you're expected to do different things with that money. And you've got different influencers and different accountability along the way, right? So series A is like, you really want to optimize the product. You want to refine the business model. You want to get those extra 5, 6, 10, 20 customers and start to prove the value of this. And then once you've proven the value, you can ask more money. You can go back to series B. You can really scale the business. That's the goal of Series B. And Series C is like, something big's about to happen. I'm going to acquire somebody, or I'm going to go IPO, or something else is happening. So the companies work more and more along the way. You're getting more money. But everywhere along that step, there is somebody there looking at you saying, what are you doing with my money? And they're keeping you accountable to that, making sure that you're meeting all the stuff that you wrote down in your term sheet, making sure that you're meeting those goals. All right, startup lesson over. Back to CloudHealth history lesson. As I mentioned, CloudHealth started this journey in 2012. It was a startup, and it was started by a person. That person's name is Joe Kinsella. He's a Boston-based entrepreneur, still around, still chat to him right regularly. He started CloudHealth in 2012, and he started it with his own money, right? So where do you think our FinOps score is at this point in time, right? Well, we're deploying a new platform. We're developing a new platform. He's probably doing it on his weekends. He's doing it at night, and he's swiping his own credit card. How could you be more accountable to what you're spending on your product than swiping your own credit card and seeing your credit card bill at the end of every month? So he's pretty damn sure that everything that he does in his product is driven by FinOps. Now, it wasn't FinOps back then. It was just like, I don't want to blow my credit card bill, right? But it was the same thing. He wanted to make sure that everything that he delivered into this product was going to get him a customer and get him on that journey from seed to A to B to C. And he succeeded, thankfully. That's why we're here. He went through Series A1 into Series B. Now, Series B, you have a little bit more scaling to do. You want to introduce more to the platform. You want to really make it sing for more and more customers. So you have to do more in the platform. And maybe you're letting that product FinOps influence lag a little bit, move more to the center, because I've got to get more customers in here. If I'm going to prove my Series B goals, I need more customers, I need more scale, I need more features. We'll worry less about FinOps, less about price. I've got a little bit more cash. I'm going to move to the center of that KPI. And again, think about the influencers, right? You've got the cash influencer and the availability of cash. Well, I have cash now, albeit for a very defined purpose. So I'm being careful where I'm spending that cash. But also, my culture, I'm hiring more people. I'm bringing more people into the organization. Those people have an impact on the culture too. You've got a very dynamic, very fast startup culture. They just want to try things, lots and lots of new things, throw them out, see if they fit. If they don't fit, fail fast, move on. That's the culture. And that, again, is impacting what we're doing from the FinOps to product influence scoring. Moving on then to Series D. Series D was just before the VMware acquisition. So I'm going to kind of treat them in the same lens. VMware acquisition happens in 2018. Let's think again about those influencers on the KPI score, right? You've got availability of cash. Yeah, VMware was a pretty big company at the time. Plenty of cash reserves available. So availability of cash is not a big concern at this point in time. And then think about culture. VMware was an engineering-led company, right? Our CEO was always a past engineer, was always a past product manager. His goal was to get features out and get customers in and drive revenue as high as he possibly could. And the target, quite honestly, for VMware in acquiring CloudHealth was to move into the public cloud space, more importantly, move into the public cloud management space. We wanted to really bolster our public cloud management capabilities. CloudHealth was our vehicle to do that. So again, bring the product in, integrate it, and then push as hard as you could to get more and more features out there, to get more customers on it, and broaden the capabilities from not just FinOps, but out into security, out into configuration management, just to get that breadth of capabilities in there. But I think this is where things started to go a little bit off the rails. Because CloudHealth is a large company, because VMware is a large company with availability of cash and a very strong engineering-led culture, we focused more on the try more, fail more side. So that pendulum started to swing more towards try more, fail more. And quite frankly, in sort of the early 2020s or thereabouts, we hit, and I'm pointing the wrong place, we hit that dreaded red splash, right? In my opinion, looking back, I think we hit the dreaded red splash. We had done so much, we had deployed so much, we'd incurred lots and lots of costs, particularly in running our cloud and running it at scale in the public cloud, that really cost went off the rails. And quite frankly, CloudHealth was supported by all of the surrounding capabilities from the other features and functions from the VMware stack. So VMware had the cash available, propped us up in the hope of, we'll hit that big one very, very soon. That didn't happen. But what did actually happen is in 2023, Broadcom acquired VMware, and with that, CloudHealth. Broadcom has a very, very different culture. Again, remember the two influencers, cash and culture. Cash still isn't a problem, although I'll get to that in a second. Culture is very different. Broadcom is a finance-led company. Our CEO is a finance person, right? And he runs an extremely efficient, extremely well-run company. Every single product has to make sense. That's his mantra. Your product, you're on your own. You have to make sense. You can't rely on others to prop you up. So we knew we had to make a change. And that's where we started to look again at the FinOps principles and work out that we need to go back to basics on FinOps principles, and we need to work out how do we get this product back in line? How do we make sure that we still focus on the core value that our customers pay us for, but get the costs back in line? And that's exactly what happened. And that's been the journey for the last year and a half that we've gone through. So again, the availability of cash. I said I'd talk about that. Availability of cash can be real or it can be made up, if you like. Okay, and by made up, I mean you have a budget. So the scarcity of cash for you is basically your budget. Your finance person is saying, you've got X dollars, you can't break through that. Don't consider the rest of the company's cash like you did in the startup days, because quite frankly, you're not a startup anymore. This is your bit. You need to fit within that box. And that's the scarcity part of the equation that a large, well-run company like Broadcom brings in. A very, very hard budget that you have to hit. So again, we've fixed those external influencers. The culture got corrected, the cash got corrected. The needle needs to swing back towards the center and back towards the left. And I think that's where we are right now. So what is CloudHealth today? Well, CloudHealth is a massive, massive data platform. We have 19 billion cloud assets under management. Think about that number, 19 billion cloud assets under management. So they are the instances, the volumes, the networks, everything that you can deploy in the cloud. Each one of those is an asset. We're pulling that in. We're pulling all the properties in as well. We do 1 million transactions per minute in our collection pipeline. Okay, million per minute. 9,000 Kubernetes pods deployed. 10 petabytes of data processed per day. 10 petabytes of data. That's 1,000 years of standard definition data. Standard definition video, right? Think about it. Netflix for 1,000 years on standard definition. That's what 10 petabytes is. Pretty huge, right? But what have we done in terms of optimization? 50% reduction in processing time. So while applying FinOps principles, we've also been able to boost the value for our customers. Reduce that processing time, the 10 petabytes per day, reduce processing time of that through a pipeline by 50%. But what about the customer? Through those savings and through right-sizing our efforts and making sure that we're focusing on a FinOps influenced product decisions, we've managed to launch a brand new CloudHealth experience. Now, this has basically been taking the savings that we made from FinOps principles and reinvesting it back into the platform so that we could relaunch ourselves as a brand new experience for the modern FinOps user. We've introduced AI into the platform, and everybody knows AI is not free, right? It can be sometimes expensive or extremely expensive, depending on how you do it. But again, FinOps has got to influence that. FinOps principles for AI is exactly the same as FinOps principles for everything else. The AI model, you're able to ask natural language questions of your data and get a pretty decent answer. We also innovated. We added a smart summary capability to telling you what your cost deltas are month over month and giving you a single sentence English summary of why those cost changes happened, and then AI to tell you how you can influence those costs, how you can change those costs. So all this to say that we saved a lot of money by going back to FinOps principles to take that new culture plus scarcity of cash, bring that KPI back down to the FinOps influenced product-led decisions, to reinvent the platform for our customers and to reduce processing time to make it better. How did we do it? Rob's going to tell us.
Thank you, Cathal. All right, so I'm going to talk about what we did. So I think I want to sort of set things up. Cathal mentioned that really at its core, CloudHealth is a big data processing platform. This is where the supermajority of our cost goes. And we had built ourselves a huge hole over the last, since 2012, that sort of got worse over time, as Cathal described. We were in startup mode, then we were in growth mode. And I think one of the things I want people to take away from this is that I think is interesting is that we're building a FinOps platform, but we weren't necessarily following FinOps best practices, which probably sounds a little weird, but it's true. And so we had to do kind of two things. One is we had to dig ourselves out of the hole that we were in. And so I'm going to talk about kind of what we did there. And then we had to change kind of our culture, like Cathal mentioned, going forward so that we don't keep digging ourselves back into that hole. So I'm going to focus this hopefully on the interesting technical problems that we solved. But I think another takeaway that I want people to have is that there's not really any magic here. Like, I'll tell you about some interesting stuff for sure, but like, I don't think anything on this list is going to super surprise people in this room. It's stuff that you've probably heard talked about in the last couple of days. You might be doing bits and pieces of it, but again, it's like you have to really lean into it. And so what did we really do? From project perspective, we ran this thing like we were delivering a feature. So we had a deadline that we had to meet a certain run rate by a certain date, and we ran it pretty much the same way we ran the program to deliver NX by June 2nd. We had a cross-functional team, so we kind of threw out some of the traditional like team and agile stuff that we had in the R&D organization, and we kind of just let people like tiger team it a little bit, and we ran it like any other program. In terms of like the key areas that we focused on, I kind of grouped them like you'll see here, and then we'll kind of dive into each one of them. So data processing efficiency was really about like the speed at which we were processing all of this data, like when we were doing it and where we were doing it. Data storage efficiency. So again, we'll get into more of the details on each of these things, but we had a lot of waste in the system. We had a lot of artifacts sitting around in S3 that were not being used, and so we got a lot smarter about that, and we purged a lot of old stuff that we didn't need. That kind of goes into the eliminating waste as well. Resource right sizing, auto scaling, and then the last one, financial instruments. Wanted to mention it because we did do it, but it's not super exciting. So I'm going to start with the deep dive on the workload processing. And so one of the sort of key like takeaway I want people to have is that I think, like, I'm not trying to make this too much about like how we use CloudHealth. We did use CloudHealth to do this, but the focus of the talk is more about what we did and not our product, right? But I will say that the real key for us was the visibility. So we use perspectives. We've got everything broken down by function and by dev team. And so you can really hold like individual teams accountable for their own costs. And so the kind of key way that we did things was we used the visibility piece, and then we kind of put that in the hands of our experts. And we said, look at this data, figure out how you can make it run for cheaper. And so jumping into what we did, unit economics was a huge part of figuring out how we could process this data smarter. So ended up doing, I got a little example on the side. The math is like fairly trivial here, but hopefully it makes sense. But what we basically figured out was the unit cost per gig processed for different instance types that workloads were running on. And what we ended up learning was that the unit cost was a lot higher on smaller instance types. And again, some of these things like after the fact might sound sort of obvious, but you really need the data to tell you that that's real. And so like all of these workloads get processed through EMR. But what we ended up being able to do was actually run a significant number of these workloads on local Spark. Things would take a lot longer on EMR. You have these smaller jobs that are running, but it's like shuffling data between nodes and doing all this dumb stuff that you don't need for small workloads. So we're able to do some smarter routing and kind of shunt jobs off to the side. And then like on that same take, call it dynamic offloading or whatever, but we had some, I would call it like fairly trivial job routing where it was like based on like customer size. Like this customer has this much spend per month. We just always put them in these pools. And what we ended up kind of learning, again, maybe like affirming something after the fact that is impossibly obvious, is that the job profiles, even for huge customers, changes over the course of the month. So at the beginning of the month, well, at the beginning of the month, they're actually huge because it's last month's bills. But, starting on like the third or fourth of the month, bills are really small. They get bigger and bigger and bigger throughout the month. And so we had to be a lot smarter about the way that we're routing these jobs. And the outcome is, one, it's cheaper to run it, but two, customers actually get the data faster. So another big thing that we did was a predictive caching. So this is, if you've used CloudHealth or if you haven't, one of the things that we do is we rebuild all of our customers' data for the last 13 months every single day. And what we learned was that a lot of those reports are never being looked at. And so this is a ton of like wasted processing time. This is a ton of wasted space on S3. And so what we started to do was look at last 45 days of actual usage and figure out what are the reports that we really need to build. And so this allowed us to eliminate tons of processing in our backend. And I did call out, I would say we did this with, I would say minimal impact to customers. I had originally written the slide as 0 impact to customers. The only thing that you could potentially see here is if you hit a report that nobody in your company had looked at for the last 60 days, it would have to build it on the fly, be a little bit slower. But there's a trade-off that we're willing to make, and the hit rate was super high with the cache. And so we haven't really had any problems in this for a while. All right. Data storage efficiency. So this is kind of building off the last thing I said, but rebuilding all of this stuff every single night. But at the end of the day, there's really like 2 artifacts that you need. So the way that the data pipelines work is raw input comes from the hyperscalers, billing files, and collection, so your assets. The pipeline has a million steps, and there's all of these intermediate artifacts that get generated. We do a lot of like enrichment, big join-in perspectives data. We do all this fancy stuff. And at the end, it produces one artifact that is the thing that actually backs the report that the customer sees. And so what it turns out is that all of those artifacts in the middle, you don't need to leave sitting around in S3. As long as you keep the input and you keep the output, the customer won't know any difference, and you can always rebuild it if you need to. And most of the time, you don't even need to rebuild it. So we got super aggressive about purging all of these intermediate artifacts. They went from, I think we used to keep them around, I don't know if it was indefinite, but it was a very long time. So now all the intermediate artifacts get purged in something like 2 or 3 days. So huge amount of space freed up, which is great. And we use S3 object tag-based lifecycle policies for this, just because the way that our prefixes are, we couldn't do it for all things. So this was super cool. Eliminating waste. So got super aggressive with just turning off idle resources. Again, it's like FinOps 101 stuff. We just had a lot of stuff sitting around in the cloud that wasn't doing anything. So we got a lot better with like using our own policies and actually turning that stuff off, which is great. Auto scaling based on spiky workloads. So I'm gonna actually go into that a little bit more on the next slide. But again, something that might come as a surprise, like we had in some places, we're actually not doing auto scaling like at all for a lot of our pools, or like the metrics that we're using for like heat up and cool down were kind of weak. And so it ended up with a lot of pools like very underutilized. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit in the next slide. Purging of unneeded data in S3, I kind of just talked about that a little bit, but we had a lot of other places that we could do this too. We had like years and years and years of backups that were not needed. If you needed a full DR, we had the last backup, and then we had backups literally going back like 7 years. It was insane stuff. And so got rid of all of that. Smarter packing onto shared data stores. This is kind of an interesting one. One of the things that we use in our platform, it's the key for our perspectives engine, is Elasticsearch. And we have this sharding model, and all of our tenants are sort of split across those shards. Over years of accumulated tech debt and time, those shards became very unoptimized in terms of the actual data that was running on them. And so we were able to reduce our Elasticsearch footprint by something like 40%, just by like repacking tenants onto different shards. That was super cool. One of my teams did that one, so I'm particularly proud of it. The last one that I did want to call out, just because it's like, I actually didn't believe them. I was kind of like a little on the outside of this program, but like I thought I was misreading something. But one way that we saved a ton of money was actually rolled our own NAT gateway. So our DevOps team are like wizards, and I don't know why anybody would ever roll their own NAT gateway, but you can save a ton of money if you want to do that. So we did it. and now we're off managed NAT gateway. We say right sizing and smarter auto scaling. So I kind of led up to that in the last slide. But again, like the whole, like all of our platform are these like asynchronous jobs that are running in the background doing all kinds of stuff. And so we have all of these pools of workers that are sitting around doing different things. And it turned out that when you looked at them, a lot of them were severely underutilized. Like I said, some cases actually had no auto scaling. They had like humans that would bring up the pool size when they got like a PD or something, and bring it back down later. In other cases, it was just like not being smart with the metrics we were using to scale out or scale back in. And we had like a lot of cases where, kind of similar to what I talked about earlier, the routing just wasn't that smart. It was like based on customers, but that wasn't actually the right metric to use. Or we had instances in the pools that were sized for like the biggest job that would ever run there, but that there was only like a very small number of those jobs running there per day. So we got a lot smarter with that stuff. And we also ended up utilizing Carpenter for our Kubernetes workloads. And so this is something that like I wasn't super close to, so I don't have all of the details, but apparently it really improved bin packing, the pods onto nodes for us, and we're able to reduce our phone rate there. So that's the response one. And last but definitely not least, I didn't want to say like, oh, how'd you like save all this money? We just like bought a bunch of savings plans. We didn't. We did buy some. So just calling out that like you should do that. So obviously we bought some savings plans and some reserved instances. And we added in, we didn't really have a lot of spot utilization in our platform before. And so we have a lot of cases where we have these like really spiky workloads throughout the day. And so we'll like sometimes breach our savings plans like baselines. And so now we're able to kind of shunt that over to Spot, and we had to write a little bit of smart routing if the jobs get interrupted or something like that. So that was super helpful as well. And I think this is my last slide. So kind of like going forward, like what did we change? So the good news is that we hit our targets. So we saved a crazy amount of money. And like super proud of the team. It took a lot of hard work and all that good stuff. But now that we dug out of that hole, it's like, how do we not do that again? Because we know from Cahal's piece here, like Broadcom culture is what it is. And we know that we need to keep costs in check. So one of the things that we added is for all new features now, part of the design review process that's been standardized at CloudHealth for a decade now, is we added in like explicit pieces around cost planning. And so that's like formally reviewed now with any new feature that goes out the door. We also, again, didn't want to talk like too much about our own platform, but we did use our anomaly detection, which has been super helpful. So that'll tell us if we have like big spikes that we weren't expecting. And then kind of the last things is like, I sort of like opened my piece of the talk with like, we have team level visibility, and we needed to make teams be accountable to costs, right? So like in the same way that teams like wake up every day and they look at like, what were my pager duties overnight? What were my, exceptions in like, in the logs or whatever, like, what are my support case, like all this stuff that you review every morning, stand up or whatever. One of the things that people are now looking at every day in the teams is cost. And if costs on the team spike up, they will be asked about it and they'll be expected to fix it. And so far, so good. It's been working. And I think that was
cool.
My piece.
Yep. So just to wrap it up, like I don't understand that, but I think you engineers in the room, you kind of there was a lot of work on the engineering side, right? There was a lot of things, and actually, you know what? They were excited about doing it. They wanted to do this stuff. There was a lot of pride in some of the savings that you were able to drive and some of the clever ways that we were able to do a lot more data processing and save some money. And the NAT gateway, I mean, you would have thought like make your own NAT gateway, but it saved a lot of money because NAT gateways are expensive. But the real driver here was, number one, the company culture, that compelling event. Now, it doesn't have to be a compelling event. You don't have to be acquired by Broadcom to save some money, right? But certainly that was our compelling event. It was like, The culture has changed massively. It's a financial-driven culture, and the scarcity of cash now exists again. Our budget is our budget, and you cannot sort of eat into everybody else's budget, which was the way at VMware. You know, VMware feature-driven. Get the feature out the door. Get the release out. Get the customers on board. We'll worry about profit later, right? No, absolutely not. Profit number one. Culture is financial-driven. Get within your budget. Deliver within your budget. Deliver to your margin. But the culture was really driven by executive buy-in, and that flowed all the way down, from the top down. So in your companies, think about, well, how much executive buy-in? Do I just have sort of a little bit of air cover and a tick box from my VP who says, yeah, FinOps is a good idea, go do it, and if you need a shout-out, I'll give you a shout-out, right? That's not really going to drive change. You really need your VP to say, I'm cutting you off at this dollar. You better not exceed it. And work with that FinOps team. They will help you achieve that goal. It is an achievable goal. Work with FinOps. Do the things that they say. Make activate the recommendations that they tell you to activate, and more. They can only tell you so much. You are engineering. It's your responsibility also. Go find those innovative changes that you can make in your application to make it save more money. And engineering enjoy it, right? It's a challenge. Engineers enjoy nothing more than a challenge. So make it a challenge. How can we do this for half the price? How can we do this at twice the speed? That's the challenge. And then bring those savings back into innovation, right? It's not just like stick it in the bank, happy days, off we go, right? We want to reinvest in the platform. We know that our platform sort of stayed visually relatively the same for quite an amount of time. A lot happened in the background, but very difficult to find that. So when we launched the new experience, what we thought was, if we were a startup today in the FinOps world, how would we design this tool? And that's exactly where the new experience came from. But in order to do that and make it real, we needed that investment. So the savings, we started to see the savings roll in. We started to reinvest those savings into the platform, reinvest them into reinventing what we wanted to do to get the value out there for the customer and to get it working faster, right? That innovation in terms of reducing time, also reducing cost, also reduced time.